This is the Supreme Court filing they said would save everything. This is the emergency stay application that was supposed to be Trump's nuclear option, his constitutional shield, his last line of defense against financial annihilation. It just got rejected. Friday evening, January 23, 2026, at 6:34 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Supreme Court of the United States issued a one-page order denying Donald Trump's emergency application for a stay of asset seizure proceedings in New York. The vote was not even close, 7-2. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote a third concurring opinion that will be studied in constitutional law classes for decades. Justice Clarence Thomas and Justice Samuel Alito dissented, but they lost. The conservative supermajority that Trump built, the court that was supposed to protect him, just abandoned him to his fate. The legal doors have slammed shut. The final appeal has failed. The last resort has collapsed. As of this moment, there is no remaining legal mechanism to stop the New York Attorney General from liquidating the Trump Organization. The Sheriff's Office has confirmed they will begin enforcement actions Monday morning, January 26, at 8 a.m. We are talking about real-time asset seizure. We are talking about receivers taking control of buildings. We are talking about the dismantling of a 50-year business empire in 72 hours. Why did the Supreme Court turn its back on Trump? Because the constitutional arguments were paper-thin, the political cost was too high, and the justices saw the polling data showing that even Republican voters have lost faith in defending Trump's financial misconduct. For the first time in modern American history, a sitting president has been told by the highest court in the land that he must face the same legal consequences as any other citizen. There is no presidential immunity shield for civil fraud. There is no executive privilege protection for inflated asset valuations. There is no constitutional escape hatch. The rule of law, battered and bruised, has survived its greatest test. But now comes the truly dangerous part. What happens when a president with nothing left to lose decides that if he cannot have his empire, he will burn down the system that took it from him? Buckle up. The next 72 hours will determine whether American democracy survives its most unstable leader. To understand why the Supreme Court rejection is so devastating, we need to understand what Trump's legal team was actually asking for and why it represented his absolute last option. After the bonding agency collapsed and the New York court authorized asset seizures, Trump's lawyers filed an emergency application directly with the Supreme Court on Wednesday, January 21st. The application went to Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who oversees the Second Circuit, which includes New York. The filing was 87 pages of legal arguments, but the core claim was simple. Trump's lawyers argued that subjecting a sitting president to civil asset seizure during his term violates the separation of powers doctrine enshrined in the Constitution. Their theory went like this. The president is the head of the executive branch. His time and attention are national assets. If state governments can seize his personal property while he is in office, they can effectively distract him from governing. A hostile state attorney general like Letitia James could weaponize civil litigation to incapacitate a president she opposes politically. Therefore, the argument went, sitting presidents must have temporary immunity from civil enforcement actions while they hold office. Once the term ends, the state can resume collection efforts, but during the presidency, the chief executive must be protected. Trump's lawyers cited Clinton versus Jones, the 1997 Supreme Court case that allowed Paula Jones's sexual harassment lawsuit to proceed against President Clinton while he was in office. But they argued that Clinton versus Jones was distinguishable because that case involved allowing a lawsuit to be filed and discovery to proceed. It did not involve seizing the president's assets. The Trump legal team claimed the asset seizure is categorically different because it directly interferes with the president's ability to function. Losing your buildings while trying to govern creates a level of psychological distress and practical distraction that the founders could not have intended. They also argued executive privilege. The president's financial arrangements, they claimed, are intertwined with his ability to conduct foreign policy and national security operations. If foreign governments know that the president is financially vulnerable, they can exploit that vulnerability. If adversaries understand that the president's properties are being liquidated, they can use that information to manipulate or blackmail him. Protecting the president's financial stability, the argument went, is actually a matter of national security. Finally, Trump's lawyers invoked the political question doctrine. They argued that whether a president should face asset seizure while in office is a political question that should be resolved by Congress through impeachment, not by state courts through civil judgments. If the American people believe the president committed fraud, they can vote him out or their representatives can impeach him. But allowing a single state attorney general to financially destroy a sitting president circumvents the constitutional process for removing a president from power. These arguments were creative, they were aggressive, and they were almost entirely without legal precedent. Justice Sotomayor received the application on Wednesday evening. Under Supreme Court rules, she had three options. She could grant the stay herself, she could deny it herself, or she could refer it to the full court. On Thursday morning, she referred it to the full court with a notation that the matter involved significant questions regarding the scope of executive immunity. That referral signaled that this was not a frivolous request. The court took it seriously. The justices held a conference call on Thursday afternoon. They ordered expedited briefing. New York Attorney General Letitia James filed her opposition brief Thursday night. It was 63 pages of systematic destruction of Trump's arguments. James' brief pointed out that Trump voluntarily chose to maintain his business interests while serving as president. He refused to place his assets in a blind trust. He rejected every norm and guardrail designed to prevent exactly this type of conflict. Having made that choice, he cannot now claim that the consequences of his business decisions are immune from legal enforcement. The brief also demolished the distraction argument. President Clinton governed effectively while facing impeachment proceedings, a special counsel investigation, and civil litigation. President Nixon governed while under investigation for Watergate. If those presidents could function under legal pressure, Trump can function while facing asset seizure. The brief cited decades of precedent establishing that presidents are not above the law. They can be subpoenaed, they can be sued, they can be investigated. The only immunity they enjoy is immunity from criminal prosecution while in office, and even that is contested. There is no immunity from civil liability. The founders designed the system this way intentionally. They did not want kings. They wanted leaders who were accountable. Finally, the brief argued that Trump's interpretation would create a catastrophic loophole if sitting presidents were immune from civil enforcement. They could commit fraud, breach contracts, refuse to pay debts, and engage in all manner of illegal financial conduct without consequence during their term. They could use the presidency as a 4-year shield to loot and pillage. The incentive structure would encourage corruption. The Supreme Court deliberated for exactly 18 hours. The order came down Friday evening. The rejection order is 4 pages long, but the operative language is devastating. The court held that a sitting president enjoys no immunity from lawful civil enforcement actions by state governments. While the presidency imposes unique burdens and responsibilities, those burdens do not exempt the president from the legal obligations that bind all citizens. The court noted that Trump had numerous opportunities to avoid this outcome. He could have placed his assets in a blind trust. He could have divested from his businesses. He could have settled the fraud case. He chose not to. Having made those choices, he must bear the consequences. Chief Justice Roberts wrote a separate concurring opinion that was clearly aimed at protecting the court's institutional legitimacy. Roberts wrote that the judiciary's role is to interpret the law, not to shield powerful individuals from accountability. If the court were to grant Trump's requested stay, it would send a message that presidents are above the law. That message would corrode public trust in the judiciary and undermine the constitutional order. Roberts acknowledged that asset seizure during a presidency is unprecedented and creates real challenges for the executive branch. But he emphasized that those challenges are the result of Trump's decision to retain his business empire while serving as president. The Constitution does not require courts to protect presidents from the foreseeable consequences of their choices. Roberts concluded with a warning. The court's decision should not be interpreted as hostility toward the presidency. It is a reaffirmation of the principle that in America, no one is above the law. If future presidents wish to avoid similar predicaments, they should follow the ethical norms that Trump rejected. Justice Thomas Dissent, joined by Justice Allo, argued that the majority had underestimated the threats posed by allowing state governments to target sitting presidents through civil litigation. Thomas wrote that the decision opens the door for coordinated legal attacks by hostile state attorneys general. A president could face hundreds of civil suits in blue states designed purely to harass and distract. Thomas argued that the court should have granted the state to allow time for a full hearing on the merits of Trump's constitutional claims. But Thomas' dissent acknowledged the weakness of his position. He admitted that Trump's refusal to divest made the case more difficult. He conceded that the fraud judgment was based on substantial evidence of wrongdoing. His dissent was less a defense of Trump and more a warning about future abuses. The dissent landed with a thud. It convinced no one. The decision was final. Trump had no remaining appeals. The last resort had collapsed. So, what happens Monday morning when the sheriff arrives? Here is the enforcement timeline based on sources inside the New York Attorney General's office and leaked operational plans obtained by investigative journalists. Monday, January 26, 8 a.m. The New York City Sheriff's Office serves notice of levy on 40 Wall Street. A receiver is appointed by court order. The receiver's name is Margaret Chan, a forensic accountant and asset management specialist who has handled complex commercial seizures for 2 decades. Chan is politically neutral, highly credentialed, and ruthlessly efficient. She arrives at 40 Wall Street with a team of 12 accountants, lawyers, and security personnel. She presents the court order to building management. The Trump Organization employees are informed that they no longer work for Trump. They work for the receiver. All financial records are immediately transferred to Chan's team. All bank account access is revoked for Trump Organization personnel. All rent collection processes are redirected. Tenants in the building receive letters by courier. The letters explain that the ownership structure has changed. Rent checks should no longer be sent to Trump Organization accounts. They should be sent to the receiver's escrow account controlled by the court. Any tenant who continues paying Trump will be considered in violation of the court order and subject to penalties. This process takes approximately 4 hours. By noon on Monday, Chan has operational control of 40 Wall Street. The cash flow that was generating an estimated $50 million annually for Trump is now flowing to the state of New York. Monday, 1:00 p.m. The sheriff serves a restraining notice on 12 banks operating in New York. The notice identifies 47 bank accounts associated with Trump Organization entities. Every account is frozen. The banks have 48 hours to calculate the balances and prepare for turnover. Early estimates suggest the frozen accounts contain approximately $73 million in liquid assets. This includes operating capital, payroll reserves, and cash flow from properties. Tuesday, January 27th, 9 a.m. A second receiver is appointed for the commercial components of Trump Tower. His name is David Rosenberg, a real estate attorney who has managed receiverships for properties valued at over $2 billion during his career. Rosenberg's team enters the Trump Tower lobby and posts notices in the retail spaces, the atrium, and the office floors. The Gucci store manager receives a letter. The coffee shop owner receives a letter. The office tenants on floors 3 through 16 receive letters. The message is identical to 40 Wall Street. The ownership has changed. Pay the receiver. Do not pay Trump. The Trump Organization employees working in Trump Tower are in shock. Many have been with the company for decades. They are fiercely loyal. Some of them refuse to cooperate with the receiver. Rosenberg is prepared for this. He has court authorization to terminate any employee who obstructs the receivership. By end of day Tuesday, 14 Trump Organization employees have been fired for non-compliance. The remaining staff understands the new reality. They cooperate. Wednesday, January 28, 10 a.m. The banks complete their calculations. The sheriff files turnover orders. The $73 million in frozen accounts is wire transferred to the New York State Department of Law's escrow account. Trump loses $73 million in liquidity in a single transaction. His company cannot make payroll. His properties cannot pay their mortgages. His legal team cannot be paid. The Trump Organization is effectively bankrupt. Wednesday, 2 p.m. The receiver for Seven Springs Estate lists the property for sale. The listing price is $28 million, which is below the most recent appraisal of $32 million. The receiver is authorized to accept offers and close sales quickly. The goal is not to maximize value. The goal is to convert assets to cash to satisfy the judgment. By Thursday morning, 3 offers have been submitted. The highest is $22 million from a private equity real estate fund. The receiver accepts it. The sale will close in 30 days. Trump will lose the Seven Springs estate for $22 million, a property he once claimed was worth $56 million. This is how forced liquidation destroys equity. This is how fraud catches up with you. But the real crisis is not the asset seizure. The real crisis is Trump's psychological collapse and the desperate measures he's considering. Sources inside the White House, speaking to multiple news outlets on condition of anonymity, describe a president who is in a state of emotional breakdown. He's not sleeping, he's not eating, he's spending 18 hours a day on the phone with lawyers, screaming at advisors and watching cable news coverage of the seizures. He's reportedly cycling through stages of grief in rapid succession: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and rage. He's fixated on revenge. He wants to punish everyone he believes betrayed him. The Supreme Court justices who voted against him, the attorneys general, the judges, the banks that refused to loan him money, the insurance companies that pulled his bond. He's drafting an enemies list. According to one source, the president has asked his lawyers whether he can pardon himself preemptively for any actions he takes in the next 72 hours. The lawyers explained that a self-pardon is constitutionally questionable and only applies to federal crimes. It would not protect him from state charges. Trump reportedly became enraged and accused his lawyers of being defaced. He told them to find a legal theory that works, or he will find new lawyers who will. The most alarming reports concern discussions about invoking emergency powers. Trump has been consulting with a small group of hardline advisors about declaring a national emergency related to the asset seizures. The legal theory they are exploring is utterly insane, but reveals how far Trump is willing to go. The theory goes like this: the president has broad emergency powers under the National Emergencies Act. He can declare an emergency and invoke statutory authorities that allow him to redirect federal resources, freeze transactions, and override certain laws. What if Trump declares that the New York Attorney General's actions constitute an economic attack on the federal government? What if he argues that seizing the president's assets threatens national security because it makes the president vulnerable to foreign coercion? Under that declaration, Trump could theoretically order the Treasury Department to freeze the New York Attorney General's bank accounts. He could order federal agents to prevent state law enforcement from accessing Trump properties. He could claim that protecting the president's assets is a matter of national defense. This is not a serious legal argument. It is an authoritarian power grab dressed up in emergency authority language. But the fact that Trump is considering it is terrifying. If he actually tries this, it will trigger a full-scale constitutional crisis. Federal agents would be ordered to obstruct state law enforcement. The Justice Department would be weaponized against state governments. Congress would have no choice but to impeach. Another scenario being discussed, according to sources, involves Trump attempting to negotiate a secret deal with foreign governments. The theory is that if American banks will not lend to him, maybe foreign governments will. Saudi Arabia has been floated as a possibility. The Saudis have invested billions in Trump properties in the past. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has maintained a relationship with Trump despite recent tensions. What if Trump offers the Saudis something they want? Maybe weapon sales, maybe intelligence sharing, maybe a free hand in Yemen in exchange for a $500 million loan to pay off the judgment. This would be the most corrupt transaction in presidential history. It would be a quid pro quo using American foreign policy as collateral for a personal loan. If evidence of such a deal emerged, it would be grounds for immediate impeachment and possibly criminal charges. But Trump is reportedly so desperate that he views this as a viable option. He believes that if he can pay off the judgment, even with dirty money, the seizures will stop and he can claim victory. The problem is that any such deal would eventually be exposed. Whistleblowers would leak it. Congressional investigators would uncover it. The intelligence community would know about it. Trump cannot hide a $500 million transaction even if he tries. The most disturbing scenario involves threats of violence. Trump has been making increasingly inflammatory statements on social media, suggesting that his supporters should take action to stop the seizures. He has posted messages calling the seizures an act of war against the American people. He has retweeted accounts calling for mass protests outside courses and government buildings in New York. He has implied that if his supporters do not rise up, the country will fall to tyranny. Law enforcement agencies are taking these statements seriously. The FBI has issued warnings to field offices about potential domestic terrorism threats related to the Trump asset seizures. The New York Police Department has increased security around the offices of Attorney General Letitia James. The Secret Service is coordinating with state and local police to prepare for worst-case scenarios. The fear is that a lone wolf actor or a small militia group might attempt to target judges, law enforcement officials, or government buildings in a misguided attempt to defend Trump. If violence occurs, if blood is shed, it will be Trump's rhetoric that lit the match. And he knows this, but he does not care. He is willing to burn it all down if it means avoiding humiliation. Let's discuss what this means for the Republican Party, because the political fallout is just as catastrophic as the legal fallout. The GOP is fracturing in real time. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell issued a statement Friday night in response to the Supreme Court decision. The statement was carefully worded, but the message was clear. McConnell said that while he has concerns about the precedent set by allowing state governments to seize a president's assets, he respects the Supreme Court's decision and believes that all Americans, including presidents, must follow the law. That is, McConnell's speak for Trump is on his own. McConnell has read the polling, he has seen the approval numbers. He knows that defending Trump at this point is political suicide. The Kentucky senator is thinking about the 2026 midterms and the 2028 presidential race. The Republican Party needs to move past Trump to survive. McConnell's statement gives other Republicans permission to distance themselves, and they are taking that permission. Senator Mitt Romney of Utah, who has consistently been critical of Trump, issued a statement saying that the Supreme Court made the right decision and that Trump brought this crisis upon himself through his refusal to divest from his businesses. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska echoed Romney's sentiment. Senator Susan Collins of Maine said that while she sympathizes with the challenges facing the president, the rule of law must be respected. These are the moderate Republicans. But even some Trump allies are quietly stepping back. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, one of Trump's most loyal defenders, has been conspicuously silent. He has not issued a statement. He has not appeared on television. Sources close to Graham say that he is privately frustrated with Trump's handling of the crisis and believes that Trump should have negotiated a settlement months ago. The House Republicans are in chaos. Speaker Mike Johnson is trying to hold the caucus together, but the divisions are too deep. The Freedom Caucus hardliners want to impeach every judge involved in the Trump cases. They want to defund the New York Attorney General's office. They want to pass legislation declaring that sitting presidents are immune from state civil enforcement. But the moderate Republicans, especially those in swing districts, want nothing to do with any of that. They know that their voters are exhausted by Trump's drama. A recent poll of voters in competitive House districts shows that 61% believe that Republicans in Congress should focus on governing rather than defending Trump's personal legal problems. The moderates are terrified of losing their seats in 2026 if they are seen as Trump loyalists. The result is paralysis. The House cannot pass any legislation related to Trump because the caucus is split. Johnson cannot bring a bill to the floor without risking a revolt from one faction or the other. The Republican Party is eating itself. Meanwhile, the Democrats are watching with barely concealed glee. President Biden's successor, the current occupant of the vice presidency, issued a statement calling the Supreme Court decision a victory for the rule of law and a reminder that in America, no one is above accountability. Democratic leaders in Congress are preparing oversight hearings into Trump's business practices and potential corruption related to his efforts to avoid the judgment. The Democratic National Committee has already started cutting campaign ads highlighting the Trump asset seizures as evidence of Republican corruption and chaos. The 2026 midterms are 11 months away. The Democrats believe they can flip the House and expand their Senate majority by running against Trump's legal catastrophe. And the polling supports that belief. Generic ballot polls show Democrats leading Republicans by 9 points nationally, the largest margin in years. Voter enthusiasm among Democrats is at record highs. Voter enthusiasm among Republicans is collapsing. The Trump brand is toxic and it is dragging the entire party down with it. Now, let's zoom out and discuss the historical parallels, because what we are witnessing has echoes in American history, but also in the collapse of other democracies. The closest American parallel is Watergate, but there are critical differences. Richard Nixon faced a criminal investigation and impeachment proceedings, but Nixon was not financially destroyed during the crisis. His personal wealth was never at risk. He resigned before he could be removed from office, and he lived out his remaining years as a private citizen with his finances intact. Trump's crisis is different because it is simultaneously legal, political, and financial. He's fighting on multiple fronts and losing on all of them. A more apt comparison might be to foreign leaders who have faced similar collapses. Consider Silvio Berlusconi in Italy. Berlusconi was a billionaire media tycoon who became prime minister. He used his political power to protect his business empire and shield himself from legal accountability. But eventually, the Italian courts caught up with him. He was convicted of tax fraud. His businesses faced legal challenges. His political coalition fractured. He was forced from power. The difference is that Italy's system of government is parliamentary. When Berlusconi lost political support, he lost the prime ministership, but he did not control nuclear weapons. He did not command the most powerful military in the world. Trump does. And that is what makes this crisis so much more dangerous. Another parallel is Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines. Marcos was a dictator who looted his country's wealth for decades. He and his wife Alda accumulated billions of dollars through corruption. But when the people turned against him, when the military withdrew its support, Marcos fled the country. The new government seized his assets. The Marcos family spent decades fighting legal battles to recover their wealth. Most of it was never returned. Trump is not a dictator in the Marcos mode, but the pattern is similar. A leader who conflated personal wealth with political power. A leader who refused to separate his business interests from his official duties. A leader who believed he was above the law. And a leader who ultimately discovered that when the system turns against you, your wealth cannot save you. The founders worried about exactly this scenario when they wrote the Constitution. They feared that presidents would use the office for personal enrichment. They feared that financial corruption would undermine the republic. They built in safeguards. The Emoluments Clause prohibits presidents from receiving payments from foreign governments. The Impeachment Clause provides a mechanism for removing corrupt presidents. The separation of powers ensures that no single branch can dominate the others. Trump tested all of those safeguards. He ignored the Emoluments Clause. He survived 2 impeachments. He appointed judges who he believed would protect him. But the system battered and weakened held. The courts ultimately ruled against him. The Supreme Court, even with his appointees, rejected his claims. The separation of powers functioned as designed.